Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
Need a powerful and entertaining way to ignite your next conference, retreat, or team building session? My keynotes don't include magic, but they do have the power to help your attendees take a leap forward by putting emotional intelligence into their employee engagement, and customer-centric leadership practices. So bring the infotainment creativity of the Fast Leader Show to your next event, and I'll help your attendees get over the hump now. Go to beyondmorale.com/speaking to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, I'm excited because on today's show, I have somebody who is helping to bring together two things that I love. That's helping people move onward and upward faster, and baseball. Judd Hoekstra was born and raised in Edina, Minnesota, with two brothers, one older and one younger than Judd. Parents are still married and actually living in Minnesota. Judd grew up with a passion for sports and any competitive activity. He was part of teams that excelled and teams that floundered. He was interested in knowing why, so he began to study leadership at Cornell University, where he played hockey and baseball. Early in his career, Judd worked with Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, in change management practices, and also focused on how to lead people through change, both personal and organizational change. And he's currently the co-author of Crunch Time, How to Be Your Best When It Matters Most with Rick Peterson. Currently, Judd serves as the Vice President of Central Region at Ken Blanchard Companies. In his role, he serves on a sales leadership team responsible for developing sales strategies, accountability for creating customer devotion, enhancing Blanchard's purpose-driven, high-performance culture, as well as top-line revenue growth and bottom-line profitability. He's also responsible for leading a team of sales consultants to achieve individual and team performance targets. This role gives Judd the opportunity to use methods he shares within his book. He also graduated from the Advanced Business Management program at Kellogg School of Management. Judd and his wife, Sherry, live in Naperville, Illinois, with his two kids, Julia and Cole. Judd Hoekstra, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Absolutely.
Now, Judd, I've given our listeners a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. My passion for a long time has been actually to help people be their best and to help them overcome some of their probably self-imposed constraints, if you will, things that maybe hold them back that they don't even realize are holding them back. And so that really is what helped me get into the idea of how do you perform your best under pressure? Because I'll share a little story, Jim, that some of my sort of toughest moments in life and worst moments, frankly, the ones that give me nightmares still are the times that I choked under pressure. And then as a parent, when you see your children going through pressure situations, and if you see them struggling and not their best and knowing that they're not performing up to their potential, whether it be test anxiety or whether it be in sports at a tryout, it kind of leaves you heartbroken that they're not able to pull it together when they need it. And so I kind of felt like this is a problem that needed to be solved both for myself as well as those around me.
Well, and I would dare to say, getting the opportunity to look over the book and the more and more that I read into it, it's one of those things that while it does have the sport context attached to it, I mean, really, this is a life book.
It is. Absolutely. We use the sports stories and analogies because, number one, there's experts who have figured this out already in sports. And second of all, I think it makes it easier for us to learn in a situation that maybe isn't exactly like ours because it lowers our defenses. So we can learn from these stories and then we can figure out which situations are we in and how do we apply those same principles to our pressure situations.
Well, and I like it too because it really, fits into what really I've done with the Fast Leader Show. And we talk about life hacks in order to help people move onward and upward faster. But the fact is that, it's about doing things correctly and having that self-awareness and learning from the stories of others that's really going to help us move onward and upward faster. It's not, in the book, you talk about working harder, and that's one of the myths. And when I look at a lot of the things in this book, they're really common practice debunk things. I mean, it's like, this is what we do socially. This is what we actually communicate and we pass down to generations socially. However, they're bad practices.
Exactly. There's a lot of truth to that. I think, we're hardwired in ways that don't help us right now, that maybe helped us, in much earlier times than we're facing today, primitive times where physical survival was really the name of the game. And now for most of us, especially I'm sure your listeners, physical survival really isn't the threat. It's more the threats are psychological in nature. So we've got hardwiring that helps us against physical threats, but actually hurts us in psychological threats.
And I think as I was reading through and even listening to you talk, I started thinking about the whole concept of, hey, if I'm not doing well or if I'm not performing well, that I need to work harder. Well, I mean, that works great if I'm harvesting and having to bring things in from the field, right? But that's not the way that work is today. I mean, it requires a whole lot of, complex thinking, as well as being aware of not just our emotions, but everyone else's emotions around us in order for us to get work done. So we have to start thinking differently than we have in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
And I think one of the things that for me, and you had the theme throughout the book, you were talking about reframing. Tell us a little bit about reframing.
Yeah, reframing is really recognizing when your kind of reflexive reaction to a situation isn't serving you well, and choosing to take a different perspective on that same situation, a different viewpoint that will actually serve you more effectively. So there's a couple steps with it. One is just pausing and recognizing when your kind of reflexive reaction isn't doing what it needs to be doing for you. And then second is actually choosing a different thought. I think many of us think that we're a slave to our thinking. If a thought comes into our head, we have to act on that. And the problem is that a lot of the thoughts that come into our head aren't helping us. So in pressure situations, we face common thoughts are fear, worry, and doubt. We call those the deadly trio of demotivators. And, you don't have to act on the fear, worry, and doubt. You don't have to succumb to it. And you can choose different thoughts. And that's really the major theme of the book is how do you reframe, how do you think differently about a pressure situation when the natural reaction is to think of it as a threat, and how do we actually learn to see it as an opportunity?
And I think one of the things that for me stood out is more and more in both work as well as personally, we have to do a better job at coaching those that are coming behind us. And I think too often we just kind of leave things to their own devices. And we don't proactively address them. And when we don't proactively address them, we get the negative consequences that is often referred to as choking, choking under pressure, choking with the test, where if, we were actually, to address those things in a proactive manner and doing it in a way that, really is going to promote the positive outcome is what we have to really start designing and thinking about doing. Like, for example, people say, you shouldn't tell your kid not to go in the street, right? What we should tell them is to stay in the yard. Mm-hmm. Like I coach baseball and I tell my kids when they go up to bat, I don't tell them, I said, and I know, what I'll say is, I know in your head, you're saying to yourself, don't strike out. I said, but what you need to be saying to yourself is, I'm going to hit it. Yeah. And you know where the strike zone is. If the ball is within that strike zone, you need to tell yourself, I'm going to hit it. Mm-hmm. What that does, it changes the outcome.
Yeah, it's what your focus is on. And I think, again, it goes back to, I think, unfortunately, that our instinctive reaction is to be focused on preventing catastrophe, preventing failure, preventing loss. And, you're exactly right. It needs to be flipped. You need to kind of flip that switch in your head and say, I need to focus on the success I'm trying to achieve. I play golf, and, the classic example is you're standing on the tee and you see water on both sides. And the first thought that naturally goes through your head is, don't hit it in the water. And the reality is, the minute you start saying that, you've put that thought in your head, it's much more likely to happen. Whereas if you said, stripe this thing right down the center of the fairway, you're much more likely to achieve that.
Yeah. And I think for me, being influenced on this whole visualization, programming your subconscious mind to really allow you to execute is something that we're not very mindful of.
Right.
So when you start thinking about both in leadership development and you have, a team that you're working with sales development, what do you find is one of the most common conversations that you're proactively having with people to get them focused in the right way?
Yeah, I think that especially in sales, one of the things that people focus on too much is their big goal for the year. Hey, I've got to sell $2 million this year. And I've got that wrapped in my head, and I wake up in the morning and I think about that $2 million, and I go to bed and I'm thinking about that $2 million that I got to achieve. And the reality is that's really distracting. It actually causes you to get stressed. It causes you to worry. I mean, it can in some ways motivate you to take action, But actually, once you realize, well, what are the actions I actually need to take to achieve that goal, to break it down into very bite-sized pieces, and to get people back focused on the activities that are going to lead to that $2 million goal, the achievement of that $2 million goal. So, I talk about it in the book that I think salespeople get distracted by the numbers. And I think that the reality is how you get to the numbers is more important. Having great quality interactions with your customers, with the prospective customers that you're working with, and setting a target for how many of those you're going to do each day so that it doesn't become so daunting. It appears very achievable to you and is achievable, and actually then gradually building on that. So if you're starting with 2 quality interactions a day with your customers, build on that and try to get to 3 after you've really gotten it honed in where you're getting 2 a day for a couple of weeks, then build it up to 3 and so on. And then you're going to start seeing the results of that activity in your numbers. But instead of looking in the rearview mirror at your numbers, you're actually looking ahead and saying, what activities do I need to take to drive the numbers?
Yeah, and the word that you use in the book is called chunking.
Yeah.
And when you started thinking about, chunking, and I see this happen in a lot of different ways, and I'm even trying to, really just had a conversation with one of my kids' teachers where they were giving him way too many instructions and he wasn't even able to figure out his first step. We're like, you need to give him smaller pieces, and so that he can have that one step be an easier step, because that inertia will also allow him and help him to take the second step.
Absolutely.
But if you put too much weight on top of his shoulder and it becomes too complex, he's not going to be able to move forward. And I think we do that a lot of times when we think about the workplace, where we give people a particular task and we give them all the details and all of the information. We're like, well, I need to tell them everything they need to know. But that's a mistake or a failure, is what you're saying.
It is. With how fast the world is moving and how much information we're all taking in, the simpler the better. And I actually have a colleague of mine that affectionately refers to it as, let's think like a donkey. Let's keep it really simple. Let's make sure that we're making it simple. It's got to, if we spend an hour as a sales leader sitting in a room figuring something out and we communicate it to our sales teams, the people that are out there on the front line selling, they didn't have the benefit of sitting in the meeting with us for an hour and talking it through. They need to be able to get it quickly. So how do we actually boil it down to its essence and make it simple and easily executable?
Now, you had the opportunity to co-write this book with Rick Peterson, who, is soon to be, I'm sure, a Hall of Fame coach.
Yeah, he is an absolute genius as a coach.
And when you started, working with him, with all the experience that you already had with the Blanchard companies and even being in a leadership role yourself, what was one thing that kind of just stood out as like a huge epiphany for you?
One of the things that he says to his pitchers is, he talks about how many, he brings this big, huge cardboard check, like the one that they give to the golfers after they win a tournament. And he brings a check like that, and it has, $5 million written on it. And he asks his pitchers in spring training, who of you wants to be able to cash this check? And all the hands go up. And then he says, okay, let me tell you what it's going to take to be able to cash this check. And he goes through and he has a very systematic way of developing pitchers, and task by task by task. And he knows what good job looks like. He knows what success looks like. He coaches them on that. But he says, now that you know what it takes, how many of you are willing to pay the price to do that? And not all the hands go up. So I think the thing that's interesting to me is, when you get to the major leagues, what he says, everybody's got talent. And in our workplaces, there are a lot of people with a lot of talent. But what's going to distinguish between the talented people is, are you willing to pay the price? And it's really often a price that others aren't willing to pay to be your best and to separate yourself and distinguish yourself. So his whole, one of the things I've learned from his preparation is second to none. His ability to prepare himself and his pitchers to know exactly what could happen in the game and to be ready for any and every situation. And that allows him to remain so calm when the heat is actually on. Whereas those that haven't thought through all those situations in advance, they're having to think through them on the fly, and they're more likely to panic. And so I think just his preparation, there's a whole chapter on the light bulb went off for me that what I thought was good preparation was I've learned mediocre preparation at best. and that what good preparation or great preparation looks like is more akin to what Rick does in getting his pitchers ready and getting himself ready for major league action.
Well, and I would dare to say, because even when you were talking, I started thinking of, well, the preparation is that mean I have to work harder. But no, that's not it. Because one of the things that you talk about with Rick and with many of the coaches as well as business leaders is that they just think differently. They look for ways to do things easier. They look for, the things that when you start talking about chunking them down to their smallest of essence, that when we do those things, it's going to lead to the outcome that we want.
Absolutely. I'd love to share a story if you don't mind. It's the story that actually opens up the book, and it's the 2001 American League playoffs. The Oakland A's are coming into Yankee Stadium. It's shortly after September 11th. The nation as a whole is sort of pulling for New York, knowing what they've been through, and the A's go in there as they're up against it, right? They're up against the Yankees. They're up against the sentimental favorite, in many cases, and what happened is the Oakland A's take a 2-0 lead. They go into the bottom of the 9th inning, and they bring out their closer, Jason Isringhausen, who's referred to as Izzy by his teammates. Izzy steps on the mound, and he walks the first 2 batters. So now you've got a 2-0 lead, but you've got the winning run coming to the plate, and it happens to be someone that earlier in the season had hit a home run off of him. And someone standing in the on-deck circle had also hit a home run off of him. So now he's got, he's feeling threatened. And Rick could see from the dugout that Izzy wasn't right. He was kind of on the back of the mound, and you could see he was tense. Jason Giambi, the first baseman, went over to talk to him to try to calm him down. He still looked tense. So Rick goes out there, calls time, and puts his arm around his shoulder. And that's one of the things that Rick did all the time in his major league career is he would put his arm around the shoulder just as a sense of saying, it's just you and me, just the 2 of us out here, even though there's 57,000 fans screaming at you. It's just the 2 of us. Let's have a quiet conversation out here on the mound. And he says, Izzy, how you doing? And Rick could feel his whole body shaking. And Izzy said, Rick, I can't even feel my legs right now. I'm so nervous. And he said, well, don't worry about it, Izzy. We don't need you to kick a field goal. So he lightened the mood by obviously cracking a joke, providing humor, which sort of, Izzy immediately starts laughing, sort of lets out a big exhale. And then what Rick did after that, in addition to kind of loosening him up a little bit, was he got him focused back on the task. So he said, forget about the runners on base, forget about the crowd screaming at you, forget about the umpire. In fact, forget about the batter. All you've got to do is throw the ball in the catcher's glove where the catcher's glove is set up. And you've done that millions of times before in your life. This is so easy for you, Izzy. And got him focused back on the task and, ran back to the dugout. Izzy strikes out, a guy, gets a couple guys to pop out, game over, A's win. And it was in 30 seconds or less, he had him back on track from a guy who was, about to have a meltdown.
Well, I think being able to recognize and connect with the individual and doing what Coach Peterson did is really going to differentiate the leader of tomorrow from the leader of yesteryear. So when you start thinking about all of these things and even that story, it's just loaded with emotion. And one of the things that we look at on the Fast Leader Show are quotes to help us focus sometimes, give us some inspiration and make sure we're heading in the right direction. Is there a quote or 2 that you can share?
There's a lot of them in the book. I think one of them that comes to mind is when you think about the junk that goes through your head when you're under pressure, and the self-talk, the negative self-talk and the criticism, a lot of us think, gosh, why am I even here? I have no chance at this. People are going to laugh at me if I don't succeed, or when I fail, they're going to laugh at me. What are people going to think of me? And, one of the things that Rick has said was, you have no right to be your own worst coach. What would you think if I talked to you that way as your coach? You'd think I was a jerk. So that's one of my favorite quotes, because we all have that swirling negative self-talk that goes through our head. That's instinctive. Again, we're hardwired with that. And we have to fight against that. And he's just saying, listen, if anybody else talked to you the way that you talk to you, they'd lock you. You wouldn't be allowed to be the coach. So why do you let yourself coach yourself that way? So his whole point is learn how to coach yourself the way that I would coach you, as opposed to, the way that you're coaching yourself right now.
I think that's a great piece of advice, because most of the time mine's yelling at me.
Mine too.
So, I mean, with all of this, and even though we're talking about in the book and the work that, we're referring to here, it really helps people get over the hump. We have to get over our own hump. Like you were saying, a lot of times we create our own that we have to get over. Is there a time that you've had to get over the hump that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, when I was playing hockey growing up, I grew up in Minnesota, and it was a little bit like, football in Texas and baseball in Florida and basketball in Indiana. It's the sport, it's the sport that everybody wants to play. And grew up dreaming of playing for my local high school team. And my senior year, I made the varsity and was excited to be playing and couldn't wait to get into the season. And got into a scenario where I basically got into a downward spiral. So I started out and I was playing on the third line out of 4 lines, and that quickly went to the 4th line of 4 lines, and I wasn't getting the ice time that I was used to getting. And I had all that junk swirling around in my head. And I got to the point where I said, every time I step on the ice, I can't get scored against. Well, I was a forward, so my job was to actually score goals and to set up my teammates for goals. And I was putting all the emphasis in the wrong area, because I knew if I got scored against, I might get sat even more and I wouldn't get any more playing time. And so this just created this huge negative cycle for me. And it got to the point that it actually was, I didn't even want to show up at the rink by the end of the season. And it was a moment that sticks with me, even though it was, more than 25 years ago. And then I got to the point where I said, the season passed and I got to the summer, and there was a summer hockey league going on. And I thought, just go out and enjoy the sport that you've loved your whole life. Just go out and play for fun. At that particular point in time, I didn't have any aspirations to play any further. Didn't know I was going to be playing in college. I said, just go out and have fun. I went out and, played my best hockey I've ever played. And it was because I didn't focus on all the things that could possibly go wrong. I didn't focus on, what were the consequences going to be if I made a mistake. I just said, just go play, just go. And I had the skills already. So that was the frustrating part of when I wasn't doing well, is that I had the skill and I had the talent and I just didn't use it. And so that was a big lesson to me, that nothing had changed with my skill set from the end of the season to the summer league. The players that I was playing against were the same competition. Nothing was really different other than my mind. It really kind of kicked me off on this journey to say how important your mind is to your performance.
Well, that's a great lesson for all of us to stop and reflect upon. I mean, I kind of envy you that you actually came to some of that realization so early on. I think I learned that lesson last week.
It was painful, but I can tell you that I'm glad as well. I wasn't glad at the time that I was going through it, but I'm really glad now, because having that adversity early and then learning a way around it has been instrumental to later parts of my career, and both in business as well as parenting.
Well, the parenting thing as a whole, brings back so many of those memories of me going through what you're talking about. And I try not to set, my kids up for the same failures, which, like you were saying earlier when we first started talking, you see your kids go through those things, and, you feel their pain and anguish, and you just don't want them to feel that way. But when you started thinking about, the book, you've co-authored a couple other books, the work that you're doing with the Blanchard companies, family, you have a lot of things going on. What's one of your goals?
I really have a goal with this book around crunch time to have it positively impact as many people as possible. And, the opportunity to do that through a book, and to, certainly you have a large following yourself, and to be able to come on and speak with you and have the word get out to many others. That's a goal of mine, is just to not have people go through the pain that I personally have gone through and that I've seen others go through. If they can avoid that by learning some lessons. And it's one of the things that I've been, I guess, really heartened by, is every single person I talk to struggles with being their best under pressure. There's not a single person. It doesn't matter whether you're a stay-at-home mom or whether you're, the highest level ranking executive, whether you're a kid facing a test, whether you're at a piano recital, every single person has their own pressure situations. And every single person without this help is going to struggle and is going to face the same thing that I talked about that was so painful. And it's like, my goal is that we have less people experiencing that pain and more people experiencing the joy of actually saying, wow, when the lights were brightest, I was ready and I performed my best. And that's really, the overarching goal of this, to make a positive difference in those people's lives, whoever the readers might be.
and the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Judd, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Judd Hoekstra, are you ready to hoe down?
Let's do it.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
For me, it's all about prioritization. Where should I be spending my time, and am I spending it in the right places? And there's times I feel like I'm not.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Be yourself. Be authentic.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
Desire to compete and win.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
I believe it's a sincere desire to help others. I think that if your heart's not there in the right place to start with, it's going to be tough to lead.
What would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Crunch Time, How to Be Your Best When It Matters Most on your show notes page as well.
I'd have to say one of my favorites is Good to Great by Jim Collins.
Okay, Fast Leader listeners, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Judd Hoekstra. And Hoekstra is Hoekstra. Okay, Judd, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I'd have to say it would be reframing, because it is the key to being able to quickly change your mental state to be able to look at something that is originally threatening and see it as an opportunity and to take advantage of that opportunity. And it's a skill that I didn't learn until after 25, but certainly glad I've got it now. I would love to take it back to when I was 25.
Judd, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Sure. The best way to reach me is at Judd, Judd, at JuddHoekstra.com. or at my website, JuddHoekstra.com.
Judd Hoekstra, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Woo-hoo! Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.